Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Kiorkof, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about the quarterback strength of schedule for the 2023 fantasy football season. Now, over the course of this week, we've talked about variables in fantasy football that are often overlooked. But for those of you who are familiar with the channel and have been here for quite some time, you know how much of an emphasis I put on matchups and strength of schedule over the course of a season, during the fantasy playoffs, or in an individual week. One of the biggest factors of our fantasy prospects succeeding or failing in a specific matchup has to do with the men that stand on the opposite side of the field that use their efforts every single Sunday to prevent our fantasy prospects from succeeding. Therefore, we take into account matchups at the quarterback position, specifically coverages going into the 2023 season, in order to determine which quarterbacks have the easiest strength of schedule and how they may end up being more fantasy relevant because of said strength of schedule. Now, in the coming days, besides the quarterback position, we'll have strength of schedules for the running back, wide receiver, and tight end positions so that you are informed with all of the information that you need prior to your 2023 fantasy football draft, because the entire point of this channel is to give you as much information to help you capture a 2023 fantasy football championship. Again, before we begin today's video and get into the nitty-gritty of all the stats that I've collected in regards to the strength of schedule, be sure to subscribe. Again, we're making daily fantasy football content all season long up until week 18 and beyond. So for those of you who are interested in trying to get an upper hand on your leagues, be sure to subscribe. Our goal is 100,000 subscribers this season, so every subscription counts. Greatly appreciate if you guys can support in that manner. Additionally, for those of you who want an even bigger advantage upon your league mates this offseason, be sure to travel down to the description of the video and head on over to Underdog Fantasy. The current promotion going on right now consists of the following. If you go ahead and sign up today using code Andrew and make a minimum first-time deposit of $10. Not only are you going to get a first-time deposit match up to $100, you're additionally going to get my 2023 fantasy football draft guide and my draft rankings for this offseason. The draft guide consists of hundreds of hours of information that I've collected in order to help you guys come draft day. Additionally, those rankings are every single primary position: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, kicker, and defense by tier, and for a 4-point per passing touchdown, 6-point per passing touchdown, half PPR, full PPR. Additionally, Top 200 Flex is included with these rankings. These rankings are updated every single week, so be sure to check your spam folder, as I will be sending you guys emails anytime I feel that it's valid to update the rankings accordingly, so keep an eye out for that. Now, on top of it, for the rest of the season from weeks 1 through 18, I will also be sending you emails every single Sunday morning with rankings for that specific week: half PPR, full PPR, all primary positions, in order to help you capture a 2023 fantasy football championship. All you got to do is use code Andrew and make that first time deposit minimum of $10 today. For those of you who are wondering whether you're eligible, the map to the right side of the screen based on your current location will determine your eligibility. If you happen to be eligible, take advantage of the opportunity on hand today. Help me help you this upcoming season, and draft responsibly via Underdog. Thank you very much. All right, let's get into talking about the quarterback strength of schedule for the 2023 fantasy football season. Specifically, the numbers that you guys can see to the right side of the screen are 2022 statistics in terms of fantasy points allowed from defenses against opposing quarterbacks. So as you can see, the number 1 ranked team, the Tennessee Titans defense, were giving up the most fantasy points per game on average in a 4-point per passing touchdown league last season, giving up 16.78 fantasy points per game. Now on screen, I've gone ahead and accumulated all of the passing statistics allowed from all these defenses in the 16 to 17 games that they played, because of course the Cincinnati Bengals and Buffalo Bills only played 16 regular season games last year, considering the one that was canceled. So when we take this all into account on a per game average, we find the following. Now, the reason why I've specifically isolated passing statistics is because regardless of what defense you play, allowing rushing yards is purely based on the quarterback that is under center. Jalen Hurts is far more likely to rush for yards in comparison to someone like Derek Carr, primarily because of the athleticism, and additionally, regardless of what that defense presents and how many yards they allow to opposing quarterbacks on a weekly basis in terms of rushing, it's not going to force Derek Carr to run the ball more. Therefore, I've gone ahead and eliminated rushing statistics from the bottom line of the fantasy defenses against opposing quarterbacks conversation. Now, when we go ahead and take these statistics and apply it for the 2023 fantasy football season, weeks 1 through 17, remember, again, you don't want to be playing a championship in week 18. Make sure your commissioners adjust that, and your fantasy playoffs consists of week 15 through 17. I'll mention that probably 7 times today. But if you apply the numbers that we've previously seen to this upcoming season schedule, we will find that the Green Bay Packers have the easiest strength of schedule at the position, while on the other side, we have the Arizona Cardinals quarterbacks with the most difficult strength of schedule going forward. Now, with this all being said, those are 2022 statistics. Defensive personnel has absolutely changed this offseason, whether it is trades, free agent signings, and or NFL rookies that were drafted. Therefore, we need to go ahead and adjust a bit of our overall statistics that we've gathered. So in order to do so this offseason, I went ahead and collected all of the coverage grades of all starting linebackers, coverage linebackers specifically, especially if they play in a nickel, and DBs this offseason of the expected starters for all 32 defenses. As you guys can see to the left side, labeled with linebacker and DB coverage grades, we find that the Los Angeles Rams have the worst coverage grades going into the 2023 season, while on the other end of the spectrum, of course, the Philadelphia Eagles defense with linebackers and DBs have the best coverage grades going into this year. When we apply this to the 17-week schedule of the 2023 year, on the other side, we have the strength of schedule based on coverages. We find that the Indianapolis Colts have the easiest strength of schedule, while on the other end of the spectrum, the Los Angeles Rams have the most difficult strength of schedule. Interestingly enough, the Rams have the worst secondary coverage, potentially, and they have the most difficult strength of schedule for the quarterbacks against secondaries. Just putting it out there. But with all of this information taken into account, we're not done. We have to go ahead and take both the metrics that I have presented already, mix them with a blend, and then we have the potential for the 2023 fantasy football season. Again, a reminder, all of the statistics that I've presented in terms of grades, these are all predictive measures because there are going to be things that are out of our control, specifically injuries, trades that are going to adjust these defenses over the course of the season. But as we approach the 2023 year, a lot of these numbers are going to stay consistent based on what we have found. Therefore, let's go ahead and let's focus on some spectrums of time going into the 2023 fantasy football season to determine the strength of schedule of the quarterback position, beginning with weeks 1 through 7. So as you guys can see on screen, we have the schedule for weeks 1 through 7, along with the teams ranked first to last in terms of who has the easiest strength of schedule. On screen, the Los Angeles Chargers from weeks 1 through 7 have the easiest strength of schedule, despite also having a bye week throughout that span of time. The teams that they take on, specifically based on the metrics that we've gathered this offseason in terms of strength of schedule, have the easiest path, followed by the Carolina Panthers, Seattle Seahawks, etc. While on the other end of the spectrum, of course, we have quarterbacks like Aaron Rodgers, of course, Jimmy Garoppolo, Tua Tagovailoa that may have very difficult schedules on hand. But let's talk about a couple names that jump off the screen based on the teams that they're associated with. First and foremost, of course, Justin Herbert. Having the easiest strength of schedule to begin the season is fantastic. It'll give us a pretty good jump start to our overall potential for success with him, with a new offensive coordinator, with a healthy team, offensive line, wide receivers. Additionally, another name that pops up here is Joe Burrow. These are two guys that are in the top 6-7 of my quarterback rankings going into this upcoming season. Of course, after the elite players like a Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, Lamar Jackson, we have these players that flank them after, but they still have the potential to reach that overall upside. It's purely just a matter of whether or not these guys can have healthy pieces surrounding them and elevate them to that next level, which we know that they're capable of doing. So obviously, two of these names, fantastic. Geno Smith, another one of these players in a pass-heavy offense that will certainly be able to take advantage of an easy schedule. Now, what we also see at the top of this list is 3 rookie quarterbacks who have relatively advantageous schedules to begin the season. Anthony Richardson has the 5th easiest schedule, weeks 1 through 7, followed by Bryce Young, who has the 2nd easiest schedule, and CJ Stroud with the 4th. Of those 3 rookie quarterbacks, again, I expect probably all 3 of them to start come week 1. Obviously, how the preseason continues and how they perform at training camp will certainly determine whether or not they're going to be, the immediate starters come week 1. But if in fact they are all starting, keep an eye on Anthony Richardson, because as we continue throughout today's episode, his schedule continues to get easier over time. And if he continues to gain experience, especially against relatively easy competition early on, the Indianapolis Colts will be in a fantastic position to succeed later on in the season, especially with the upside of his rushing statistics. When he has an easier strength of schedule passing, when we know he's not as polished of a passer as some of these other quarterbacks, it certainly helps him. Now, on the very back end of this entire conversation, of course, we have the number 32 team, the New York Jets. Just want to put it out there. Quarterbacks like Aaron Rodgers are matchup proof. I don't care who Aaron Rodgers is playing up against. Unless the pass rush is a complete nightmare and is going to light him up, just like a couple years ago, we saw them take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on multiple occasions, absolutely got just destroyed because of that pass rush. But I just want to put it out there. If in fact you are worried about a quarterback because of their strength of schedule early on not being great, again, if they're an elite quarterback, it shouldn't bother you. Moving on, let's talk about the schedule from weeks 8 through 14. Another spectrum of time throughout the season, which of course is important. And oftentimes throughout this span of time, we have the trade deadline that approaches that perhaps if in fact, once we get to the fantasy playoffs conversation in weeks 15 through 17, you might want to ship some players prior to getting to your fantasy playoff conversation. Nonetheless, let's go ahead and talk about some players that I absolutely want to mention once again based on the ease of their strength of schedule throughout this spectrum of time. Joe Burrow, again, a player that has top 12 in terms of strength of schedule in both weeks 1 through 17 and now weeks 8 through 14. Another name that pops up. Deshaun Watson is also in that conversation, had the 10th easiest strength of schedule earlier on and now has the 7th. Fantastic. Derek Carr for the New Orleans Saints, another one of these players from weeks 1 through 7, had the 11th easiest strength of schedule, now has the 2nd. We're in a position where we have these quarterbacks that over the course of the season are just finding matchups that really are advantageous. I don't know if you guys have seen the New Orleans Saints schedule this year. They do not play any good teams. The quarterbacks that are associated with the teams that the New Orleans Saints take on, I mean, it is absolutely advantageous for their defense, but particularly their offense, as they'll be continuing to get the ball consistently back due to the efforts of their defense. Let's look at this schedule. Just looking at weeks 8 through 14, they take on 2 rookie quarterbacks, one in Indianapolis, one in Carolina. They take on Desmond Ridder in Atlanta. Of course, you could honestly be considered a rookie quarterback. And then you take on Justin Fields. That defense has been putrid, and so has the Minnesota Vikings defense, and so has the Detroit Lions. Their secondaries, their defenses as a whole have not been addressed enough this offseason to, really fix majority of the gaps that they had in terms of coverage last year. So there's a lot of advantageous matchups on hand for Derek Carr throughout that spectrum of time. And obviously, if Derek Carr is playing well, so will Chris Olave. Nonetheless, the only other thing I wanted to mention before we get into the fantasy playoffs conversation, the Buffalo Bills, the Los Angeles Chargers, Philadelphia Eagles, of course, the Seattle Seahawks, they all sit at the very bottom of this conversation. These quarterbacks, specifically Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts, they are matchup proof. Do not worry. Do not let it concern you. We are primarily looking at these numbers to promote other quarterbacks who will have advantageous matchups, who can beat spot starts, who can fill in and still be relevant fantasy options, regardless of the fact that maybe they're not the highest upside players. They don't have that rushing potential, but they still may be in a conversation to be relevant based on their schedules. Let's move on to the fantasy football playoffs from weeks 15 through 17. Reminder to commissioners, make sure your fantasy championship game ends week 17. Make sure of that. Okay, so let's talk about the fantasy football playoffs. Who has the easiest strength of schedule? Of course, we see names like Anthony Richardson with the Indianapolis Colts at the very top. Again, we see, of course, Cincinnati Bengals at the top of this conversation once again. Really isn't much of a surprise. There's a reason why Joe Burrow was the thumbnail for today's episode. He continues to find himself pretty advantageous matchups. The only other names that kind of pop up here, obviously we see Green Bay at the top of the conversation, but we'll get to that in just a moment. But we have Philadelphia and Baltimore in the top 6 for the fantasy playoffs. The whole question is going to be, can these two quarterbacks who have both missed the fantasy playoffs for a majority of the last 2 seasons, are they both going to be healthy by the time we get there? That is going to be the primary question, because if they are, they absolutely can deliver a championship based on the strength of schedule in terms of coverages and of course fantasy points allowed based on last season's defenses. So when we take that all into account, ultimately a lot of good quarterbacks at the top of this conversation that could help us win 2023 fantasy football championships with their efforts, and of course the efforts of some of these defenses in terms of stopping them via coverage. Nonetheless, let's go ahead and let's combine it all and close out today's video with weeks 1 through 17 strength of schedule for the 2023 fantasy football season, all combined, all on screen, in order to give you guys a better understanding as to who has the most advantageous strength of schedule. It is the Indianapolis Colts, followed by the New Orleans Saints, etc. Again, Anthony Richardson, if he has upside on the ground, of course, as long as he's relevant through the air, like I've talked about already this offseason, he can be just as good as Marcus Mariota was last season, who prior to his season-ending injury, Marcus Mariota was the number 12 overall ranked quarterback in fantasy football in terms of total points scored throughout that span of time. There can be relevancy. Derek Carr, of course, Jordan Love at the number 3 spot with the Green Bay Packers. These are quarterbacks that in a super flex format have far more upside in comparison to a QB starting league. Perhaps if you want to draft Anthony Richardson and have Derek Carr on roster and then utilize both of them against advantageous matchups, you can. But ultimately, in a 1 QB league, these are never guys that are absolutely starting every single week unless they're going to take steps forward, similar to the way that Jared Goff and Geno Smith did last season. Otherwise, we once again see the Cincinnati Bengals in this conversation. Justin Fields and the Chicago Bears at number 7. That obviously is going to help him in the long run. We know that his overall base of production is going to be found in terms of his rushing statistics, but once you start to get into the mix of passing stats starting to rack up, that's fantastic, along with Lamar Jackson, the Baltimore Ravens, Deshaun Watson, the Cleveland Browns, and of course, Trevor Lawrence with the Jacksonville Jaguars. These are advantageous strength of schedules, top 12 amongst the position, and in my opinion, should end up leading to their overall success. Again, for those of you who are worried about quarterbacks at the back end of the conversation, for example, Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings sitting at number 29, it sometimes is difficult because Kirk Cousins has no potential rushing upside. So when he is going up against difficult coverage, it is going to be tough. But then again, he has Justin Jefferson, and that is elite wide receiver play. Anytime we have teams in which you have elite wide receiver play, even though you have a difficult strength of schedule, don't worry about it. For example, Minnesota, Miami, Buffalo, the New York Jets, Dallas, they all have number 1 receiving options that will be able to allow them to get out from underneath the difficult strength of schedule. So don't worry about it. That's going to cover it for me today. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Hope you enjoyed today's content. Tomorrow, we'll continue with the strength of schedule conversation with another primary position. Until then, again, reminder, if you guys have not yet already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. We're bringing you guys daily fantasy football content. Of course, some that is, honestly, not going to be found anywhere else. I'm providing this information so that you can make the most informed decisions in your upcoming drafts in order to help you win a 2023 fantasy football championship. So, of course, subscribe today. Help us get to our goal of 100,000 subscribers and be a part of the journey, because every sub counts. I greatly appreciate that. Additionally, for those of you who haven't checked out Underdog Fantasy yet, be sure to do so today. Like I've said before, if you sign up using code Andrew and make a first-time deposit minimum of $10, you're not only going to get the first-time deposit match, my draft guide, my draft rankings, of course, all of that updated weekly and sent to your email. Check the spam folder. You're also going to get the weekly Sunday morning rankings from weeks 1 through 18, half PPR, full PPR, flex, all positions by tier, in order to help you win. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Take advantage of the opportunity on hand. And until tomorrow, I'll see you guys. Peace.